There is a hallway in a nursing home outside Tampa, Florida, where a dinner tray has been sitting on a side table since Tuesday evening. Today is Friday. The fork is still resting on the plate, exactly where someone placed it 3 days ago. The roast beef has calcified into something the color of old leather. The mashed potato has a skin on it now, cracked like dry earth. A paper napkin is still folded into a neat triangle beside the plate, the way the kitchen staff were trained to fold them in 1998, the way they still fold them today, because the training manual was never updated, and nobody ever bothered to change it. The door to the room beside the tray has a laminated name card. First initial, last name, room number. Below the name, in smaller print, a note from the resident's daughter, taped there 4 years ago when her mother first arrived. Please knock twice. She gets startled. The tape has yellowed. The daughter lives in Ohio now. She visits twice a year. Inside that room, a call button has been pressed. The small plastic pendant is still warm in the resident's hand. The light above the door has been blinking red for 31 minutes. The nearest nurse is responsible for 42 other residents tonight. She will get there, eventually. This is not an expose. This is not a scandal. This is a Tuesday. Welcome to the United States of America in 2026, where 57 million adults are over the age of 65. 1 in 4 of them will spend the final chapter of their lives in a place they never chose, in a town that had forgotten them long before they arrived. 1 in 7 lives below the federal poverty line, a number that has risen for the first time in 50 years, every single year for the last decade. Elder homelessness is the fastest growing category of homelessness in the country. Social isolation among Americans over 70 now kills more people annually than diabetes. These are not abstract figures. Each one is a person sitting in a house that no longer receives visitors, counting out a week's worth of medication into a plastic organizer with slots for Monday through Sunday, knowing there is nobody to notice if the slots are never emptied. Picture yourself standing at the door of that room in Tampa. The blinking red light above you. The unanswered hallway stretching to your left and to your right. The distant sound of a television playing to a room whose occupant has been asleep for 6 hours. The smell, and every nursing home in America has a version of this smell, of industrial cleaner trying and failing to mask something softer and sadder underneath. A smell of institutional soup, of stagnant air, of time that has stopped moving. This is ground zero, not of a disaster, of a quiet, ongoing, systematic forgetting. This is a countdown of the 10 worst places to grow old in the United States of America. Not the poorest, though some of them are poor. Not the most dangerous, though some of them are dangerous, but the places where the architecture of American life, its hospitals, its pharmacies, its bus routes, its neighbors, its churches, its children who moved away for work, has failed the oldest among us most completely. The places where, if you are lucky enough to reach 80, you will do so alone. The rules are simple. A place qualified for this list if it met 3 measures. Life expectancy below the national average by at least 3 years. Elder poverty rates significantly above the national median, and a documented, measurable collapse of the infrastructure that older people rely on to stay alive. Hospital closures, pharmacy deserts, nursing home inspection failures, bus route cancellations, Meals on wheels, wait lists measured in years rather than weeks. Some of the places on this list have beautiful names: Sunset Hills, Peaceful Valley, Harmony Ridge. The gap between the name carved on the entrance sign and the reality behind the tree line is, in many ways, the entire story. An elderly couple moved to a place called Sun City once, believing the name. What they got was 115 degrees of concrete, a neighborhood where the nearest grocery store closed in 2019, and a community center converted into a storage facility for the developer's unsold units. The American bargain, the one that every generation of workers was taught to believe in, went like this. You work, you contribute, you pay your taxes, and you raise your children, and you serve your country if asked. And in return, when you are old, you will be cared for. Your community will be there. Your family will visit. Your pension will stretch. Your health care will cover what you need. You will die with dignity, in a place you know, surrounded by people who know your name. That bargain has been quietly, systematically broken. The places on this list are where the breakage is easiest to see. If you were to walk into any one of the 10 places we are about to count down, you would find the same still life, repeated with small variations. A calendar turned to the wrong month, a list of phone numbers taped to a fridge with 3 or 4 names crossed out, a rocking chair facing a window that looks out on nothing. A framed photograph of a Christmas morning from a decade ago, when the children still came home. We begin with a place whose life expectancy is lower than that of Syria. We will end at a number 1 that is not a town, not a county, not even a state, but a system, an industry, one that 90% of you watching this tonight have already encountered or soon will. This is a long one. Settle in. Turn the lights down low if you like. The story we are about to tell is a dark one, but it is a true one, and the people in it deserve to be remembered. These first 3 places do not collapse. They calcify. The decline is measured not in events, but in absences, in things that used to be there and are no longer. A bus route, a pharmacy, a neighbor, a doctor. Each absence, taken alone, is a small inconvenience. Taken together, over 20 years, they become a kind of quiet erasure. The towns do not die. They simply stop being places where an old person can survive. Number 10, McDowell County, West Virginia. If you drive south from Charleston along Route 52, through the long, folded valleys of the Appalachian coal fields, you eventually reach a county where the life expectancy for a man born today is 64.8 years. That is lower than the life expectancy in Syria. It is lower than the life expectancy in a country that has been at civil war for over a decade. This is McDowell County, West Virginia, in the continental United States of America. And a man born here can expect to die before he is old enough to collect his own Social Security. In 1950, McDowell County was home to nearly 100,000 people. The coal seams ran deep, the wages were good, and the main street of Welch, the county seat, had 7 department stores, 3 cinemas, and a hospital that delivered more babies per year than any other facility in the state. Today, the population is under 17,500. The department stores are boarded. The cinemas are gone. The hospital is a shadow of what it was. And in 2023, the last independent pharmacy in the southern half of the county closed its doors after the owner, who was 71 years old himself, could no longer afford the insurance premiums. 19,000 residents. One pharmacy, an hour's drive away, for the entire Southern District. Picture the kitchen table of an 82-year-old woman in the hollows outside Iaga, West Virginia. On that table sits a plastic pill organizer, the kind sold at every drugstore in America, with a small hinged lid for each day of the week. Monday is empty. Tuesday is empty. Wednesday is empty. It is only Wednesday afternoon. She has been rationing. The medication that was supposed to last her a month has to last her 6 weeks now, because the drive to the pharmacy takes a tank of gas she cannot afford, and the neighbor who used to take her stopped answering the phone 2 months ago. Beside the pill organizer is a list of phone numbers, written in a hand that has become unsteady over the last few years. 9 names. 4 have pencil lines drawn through them. 1 has a small cross beside it, and the date. That was October. The drug overdose death rate in McDowell County is the highest in the United States of America. The opioid crisis, which the national conversation has largely moved on from, never moved on from here. The elderly survive their own children, and sometimes their own grandchildren. There is a phrase in Appalachian communities now, skipped generation households, for the households where the elderly are raising the very young because the middle is gone. Gone to the mines, gone to the fentanyl, gone to the grave. Imagine the sound of the wind moving through a hollow at dusk, in a house where the television is the only human voice she has heard in 3 days. The pill organizer sits open. It is still Wednesday. Number 9. Athens County, Appalachian, Ohio. 200 miles northwest of McDowell, across the Ohio River, sits the county with the highest rate of elderly poverty in the state of Ohio. Athens County is not famous. Its main town shares a name with the Greek capital and a university that brings in thousands of students every autumn. And every spring, those students leave, and the county returns to being what it has been for 40 years. A place where the roads have potholes the local government can no longer afford to fill, and where the hospital, in 2022, quietly closed its maternity ward because there were not enough babies being born to justify the staff. The nearest emergency room, from the furthest rural corners of Athens County, is 47 minutes by car. 47 minutes. For an 85-year-old with chest pain, 47 minutes is not a commute. It is a death sentence. Step inside a small farmhouse in the village of Amesville. It is cold in here. The thermostat reads 58 degrees because the heating oil has not been delivered this month, and the old widow who lives here is waiting for her Social Security check to clear. Above the kitchen sink, taped to the inside of a cupboard door, is a piece of notebook paper. On it, in pencil, the phone numbers of her neighbors. Not the young ones, the old ones. The ones who, like her, are still here. The list has 14 names on it. 3 have a single line drawn through. 1 has moved to Daughters, Columbus beside it, dated 2021. 2 have passed beside them. 1 has a question mark. She's not sure what happened to Harold. Harold simply stopped answering one Thursday, and she was not well enough to drive over and check. Nobody told her. Nobody would have known to tell her. The ambulance response time in parts of rural Athens County now averages over 30 minutes. The county's 2 nursing homes have a combined waiting list of 140 people. The food pantry in Nelsonville reports that the fastest growing category of clients is Americans over the age of 70. 8 of them showed up last week. Last week alone. If you were to walk through the village of Amesville today, population 142, median age 58 and climbing, you would pass porches with rocking chairs on them, and almost none of the chairs would be occupied. Not because the residents are out, because the residents are inside, sitting in the dim light of a television tuned to a news channel they no longer understand, waiting for a check or a caller or nothing at all. This place is not abandoned. Abandonment implies a departure. These people never left. The world left them. Number 8. Oglala, Lakota County, South Dakota. The town of Pine Ridge sits in the southwest corner of South Dakota, on the reservation of the Oglala Sioux tribe, and Oglala, Lakota County has the lowest median household income of any county in the United States of America. $26,800 for an entire household per year. The federal poverty line for a family of 3 is over $24,000. The entire county, on average, is living within $1,000 of it. The life expectancy here for indigenous men is 52. Not 82, not 72, 52. It is the lowest documented life expectancy of any county in the continental United States, and in some years it has been the lowest life expectancy anywhere in the Western Hemisphere outside of Haiti. To be an elder on this reservation is to be a survivor, literally. Almost every person over the age of 70 in Oglala, Lakota County has outlived most of their own siblings. Many have outlived their own children. The rate of suicide among young Lakota men is more than double the national average. The rate of diabetes is the highest of any ethnic group in the country. The rate of alcohol-related death is staggering. The elders remain, and they carry the memory of the ones who did not. Picture a small government-built house on the outskirts of Manderson. The paint has weathered to bone. A wooden wreath hangs on the front door, made years ago by a granddaughter from twigs and ribbon. The ribbon has faded to white. Nobody has replaced it. Nobody will. Inside, an elder sits at a kitchen table. The table is covered with a plastic cloth that has a map of the United States printed on it. She's been looking at the same corner of the map, a small rectangle labeled South Dakota, for 20 minutes. Her grandson died last winter. He was 31. There is a framed photograph of him on the shelf behind her, beside a bundle of sage and a feather tied with red thread. Measurable deprivation here is not a statistic. It is a roll call. 47% of homes on the Pine Ridge Reservation do not have complete plumbing. 60% do not have telephone service. The Indian Health Service clinic that serves the county is chronically underfunded. Elders with diabetes wait months for specialist appointments. 1 in 3 elders on the reservation has no running water. 1 in 3 in America in 2026. And still, the porch of that house faces east, as tradition requires. The elder inside sets out a small bowl of food every morning for the ancestors. The wreath hangs on the door, faded but not taken down. Imagine the sound of a prairie wind in March. A single porch, a single bowl. A woman who has buried more people than most nations lose in a generation, and who gets up every morning and sets the table anyway. We are only on number 8. The next 3 places look from a distance like prosperity. They have palm trees. They have sunshine. They have billboards advertising retirement communities with names like Golden Horizons and Peaceful Shores. That is what makes them worse. Because the cruelty of the towns we just walked through is at least visible. The cruelty of what comes next has been painted over. The 3 places we are about to visit have something the previous 3 did not. They have brochures, they have palm trees, they have sunshine and gated entrances and signs at their city limits welcoming visitors to paradise, the jewel of the Southwest, America's most beautiful retirement community. From the highway, each one looks exactly like the dream that was sold to an entire generation of American workers. The dream that if they saved enough, retired somewhere warm, and bought into the right community, the last chapter would be the golden one. Behind the tree line, something is rotting. The horror of these places is not that they failed. It is that they were built to succeed and then quietly stripped for parts, while the elderly residents who believed in them were left behind, holding deeds to houses in neighborhoods nobody is coming back to. Number 7. San Bernardino County, the Inland Empire, California, 90 minutes east of Los Angeles, where the coastal haze gives way to the flat, hot plateau of the Inland Empire, sits San Bernardino County, the largest county by land area in the continental United States of America, and one of the places where the Californian retirement dream went to quietly die. In the 1970s and 1980s, developers carved subdivisions out of the desert scrub and sold them to retiring blue-collar workers from Los Angeles, Chicago, and Detroit. The pitch was simple: sunshine, affordable homes, a community of your peers, a swimming pool, a clubhouse, a clean break from the cold winters and crowded cities of the life you were leaving behind. Hundreds of thousands of Americans said yes. They packed up, they drove out, and they built a life in places with names like Sun Lakes, Silver Ridge, and Del Webb's Sun City Palm Desert. 40 years later, the air quality in San Bernardino County is ranked the worst in the United States of America. Not one of the worst. The worst. The combination of diesel traffic from the logistics corridor, wildfire smoke that now blankets the region for months at a time, and the geographic trap of a valley ringed by mountains has created an air shed where, on bad days, the elderly are advised not to leave their homes at all. For a woman with emphysema who retired here in 1991, believing she was moving somewhere healthy, this is a particular kind of betrayal. Elder homelessness in the county has risen 64% in the last 5 years. Rent in the affordable senior complexes has outpaced Social Security increases every single year since 2015. The promise of the community clubhouse, the shuffleboard court, the heated pool, many of these amenities have been closed, converted, or left to decay as homeowners associations quietly went bankrupt one by one through the 2000s and 10s. Picture yourself driving down a quiet residential street in Yucaipa on a Sunday afternoon in July. The temperature is 108 degrees. The sidewalks are empty because the sidewalks are dangerous. Heat stroke happens in minutes out here. Beside the entrance of a gated community, a real estate sign has been bleached to a pale grey. The words, "Active Senior Living," still faintly visible. Behind the gate, the fountain in the central courtyard is dry. It has been dry for years. The pump was too expensive to fix after the last assessment. In one of the houses, Number 47 on a cul-de-sac called Desert Rose Court. A window air conditioner hums in the bedroom window. It is the only one in the house that still works. The elderly man who lives there has moved his bed, his chair, and his television into that single room. The rest of the house is closed off. He calls it living in the lifeboat. On his refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a pineapple, is a postcard from 1993. It shows a younger version of himself and his late wife standing in front of this very house on the day they moved in. The caption on the postcard, written in her handwriting, reads, "Our last house. Paradise at last. She died in 2017. He has not taken the postcard down. Number 6. Lake Charles, Louisiana. 800 miles east, across the Mississippi River, and into the humid bottomland of the Gulf Coast, sits the city of Lake Charles, Louisiana, and a story that most of the country has simply forgotten. In August of 2020, Hurricane Laura made landfall here as a Category 4 storm. 6 weeks later, before the debris had been cleared, before most insurance claims had even been filed, Hurricane Delta arrived. Category 2, directly over the same city, along almost exactly the same track. 2 major hurricanes within 43 days, striking the same working-class Gulf Coast community at the height of the pandemic, when the federal disaster response system was already overwhelmed. 4 years later, thousands of elderly residents of Lake Charles are still living in FEMA-issued trailers in the yards of houses that were destroyed. Not hundreds. Thousands. The Louisiana Medicaid waiting list for home-based elder care services has approximately 8,000 people on it. The average wait time for placement is measured in years, not months. Every week, names are quietly removed from that list, not because they received services, but because they died. Imagine stepping inside one of those trailers on a July afternoon in Calcasieu Parish. The air inside is 94 degrees and thick with humidity the air conditioner cannot touch. The trailer is 8 feet wide. A single fan rotates in the corner. On the wall above the small fold-down table, a framed family portrait has been hung at the correct height, eye level, as if this were a proper living room. The photograph is warped. The humidity has lifted the edges of the print away from the mat, and the faces of the family inside have taken on a rippled underwater quality, as though they are slowly being pulled away by the tide. On a shelf beside the portrait, a Bible sits open. Beside it, an ashtray. Beside that, a notebook in which an 81-year-old woman has been writing, in careful script, a list of everything she owned in the house before the storm. The list is 17 pages long. She keeps remembering things: a quilt her mother made, a soup tureen, the baptismal certificate of her oldest son. Across the parish, 200 yards from this trailer, her actual house still stands. The roof is tarped. The walls are stripped to the studs. She has been told for 4 years now that the rebuild is coming. The contractor was supposed to come in March of 2022, then June of 2023. Then the insurance company filed for bankruptcy reorganization. Then the FEMA program that was covering her rent supplement was cut. She is 81 years old. She has lived in a trailer for longer than many children in Lake Charles have been alive. Picture the sound of a summer rainstorm on the thin metal roof of that trailer. Picture the woman inside turning to the next page of her notebook, writing down one more thing she has just remembered. she would like to go home. Nobody has told her, in plain words, that she is not going to. Number 5. Maricopa County, Arizona West, across Texas and the desert, to a place where the American retirement dream and the American climate crisis are colliding in real time. Maricopa County, Arizona, is home to Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, and some of the largest and most famous retirement communities in the United States. It is also the place where, in the summer of 2023, the medical examiner's office investigated 645 heat-related deaths, the highest number ever recorded by any American county in a single year, and a number that has risen every year since. In 2024, it was higher. In 2025, higher still. The bulk of these deaths are elderly. Heat is now the number one weather-related killer of seniors in the United States of America. It kills more elderly Americans than hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and cold weather combined. And the forgotten edges of Maricopa County, the trailer parks, the low-income senior apartments, the older neighborhoods with no tree cover and no sidewalks, are the front line. Consider a mobile home park in the southern reaches of the county, just off a county road that sees a passing car every 4 or 5 minutes. The park was built in 1978. Most of the residents are over 70. The park's swimming pool has been closed since 2019 because the Homeowners Association could not afford to repair it. A chain-link fence surrounds it now. Inside the fence, the concrete is cracked, and weeds grow up through the cracks. Outside one of the trailers, in a small patch of dirt that used to be a garden, a white plastic lawn chair faces east. Next to the chair, on a small overturned milk crate, sits a drinking glass. The glass has a 1/4 inch of water in it. The water is not drinkable. The heat of the afternoon has brought it to nearly the temperature of the air. There is no shade tree. There was supposed to be a shade tree. It died in the drought of 2020 and was never replaced. The Bahama woman who owns the chair is 79 years old. Her air conditioning unit failed at the beginning of July. The repair quote was $1,100. She does not have $1,100. She has been told by the park manager that the waiting list for emergency AC replacement through the county's Low-Income Energy Assistance Program is currently 14 weeks long. She spends her afternoons moving from the coolest room in her trailer, the bathroom, where she has placed a kitchen chair, to the front porch, where at least the air is moving, then back again. The State Tourism Board calls this region the Valley of the Sun. The Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office, whose investigators arrive at scenes all summer long to find elderly bodies in overheated trailers and apartments and occasionally on sidewalks, has a quieter, more honest name for the summer months. They call it the season. As in, we're coming into the season. As in, we lost 47 this week. It's the season. If you were to walk through that mobile home park at sunset in August, you would pass trailer after trailer with a single window unit rattling in the only bedroom that still holds cool air. You would pass porches where lawn chairs face east, towards the morning, because the morning is the only part of the day that is survivable. You would pass one particular porch where a woman sits, watching the sky go from white to orange to red, holding a glass of water that has gone warm in her hand, waiting for the 14th week of her 14-week wait to begin. That was number 5. The American dream, sold in 3 different climates, rotten in 3 different ways. The next 2 places strip away the palm trees entirely. The next 2 places are where America's industrial century came to an end, and where the elderly who built that century were left behind to witness the ending. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a city that used to make things. It is not the silence of a forest or a desert. It is the silence of machinery that has stopped, the absence of a sound that used to be constant, and that the human ear never quite adjusts to losing. The lunch whistle that no longer blows, the shift change that no longer happens, the railway sidings where no rail cars are being loaded, and no rail cars are being unloaded, and the weeds grow up through the ties. The elderly who remain in these cities are the people who built them. They welded the chassis, they poured the steel, they wired the assembly lines, and they were promised, in writing, in union contracts, in the speeches of presidents and mayors, that the country that had asked so much of them would in the end take care of them. It did not. Number 4. Detroit, Michigan Drive, east from the Ambassador Bridge into the city of Detroit, Michigan, and the scale of the vanishing is the first thing that registers. Entire blocks, in entire neighborhoods, where 2 or 3 houses still stand among the empty lots. The lots are not abandoned in the way a single house is abandoned. They have been reclaimed. The grass grows waist-high in summer. Pheasants nest in some of them now. The city, at its peak in 1950, held 1.85 million people. Today it holds approximately 630,000. Over 1 million residents departed, and the people who remained were overwhelmingly the ones who could not afford to leave. 40% of Detroit's elderly residents live below the federal poverty line. Not 40% of its population, 40% of its seniors. The city has approximately 5 full-time geriatric psychiatrists, serving a population of 130,000 elderly residents. The mathematics of that ratio is almost unreadable. A senior in crisis in Detroit is essentially on a waiting list for a waiting list. Step onto a residential street on the east side. The house at the end of the block is still occupied. A hand-painted sign in the front window reads, "Yes, I live here. Please do not scrap." The sign has been there for years. It is meant to deter the scrappers who comb the neighborhood at night for copper pipe, aluminium siding, anything metallic that can be sold for a few dollars. They sometimes mistake occupied houses for abandoned ones. The sign is a small act of defense against being erased. Inside the house lives a man a man who worked 37 years at the Ford River Rouge complex, retired in 2002, buried his wife in 2014, and has lived alone ever since. The wallpaper in his hallway is the same wallpaper his wife chose in 1971. The kitchen linoleum has a permanent shadow where a refrigerator used to stand, before the refrigerator broke, and he replaced it with a smaller one that sits 3 inches to the left. On a hook by the front door hangs his old work coat. On the lapel, still pinned, is a UAW Local 600 button, burnished to a soft gold by 50 years of handling. He has not taken it off the coat. He does not wear the coat anymore. A block away, in the summer of 2023, an elderly woman was found in her bedroom 11 days after she had died. The mail had piled up on her porch for a week before a neighbor noticed. The neighbor, herself 78 years old, called the city. The city took 4 more days to respond. The woman had been dead, alone, in her own bed, for 11 days, on a block where 3 other people still lived, in a city where she had been born in 1937, and nobody had known. Picture yourself walking down that block at dusk. Count the ramps on the front porches, the plywood ramps, the metal ramps, the ones that have been there for decades. Count the mobility scooters left chained to porch railings, slowly rusting in the Michigan rain. Count the Meals on Wheels magnets on the doors, the little orange diamond-shaped stickers that indicate a client, and then count the houses where the sticker is still there, but the porch light has not been turned on in a long time. Detroit is not a dying city. Detroit is a city that has been dying publicly for 50 years on the front pages of newspapers, and has been dying privately, quietly, in the bedrooms of its elderly for just as long. The deaths of despair, the fentanyl, the alcohol, the suicides, the simple failures of the body that come when nobody is checking in, are not only a crisis of the young. Among Detroit seniors, the rates of isolation-related mortality are among the highest ever recorded in an American city. The UAW pensioners who built the cars that built the American century are many of them ending their lives in houses where the thermostat is set to 58 degrees in January, because the gas bill has become a choice between heat and medication. And the medication is winning for now. Number 3, Youngstown, Ohio. East along Interstate 80, across the flat farmland of Ohio, to a city that the country stopped visiting around the time the last blast furnace went cold. Youngstown, Ohio, once held 170,000 people. The Mahoning Valley was one of the great steel-producing regions of the world. When the mills began closing in September of 1977, a date still referred to in Youngstown as Black Monday, the city began a contraction so severe that demographers now study it as a model of what urban collapse looks like over 2 generations. The current population is approximately 60,000. 110,000 people left over the course of 45 years, and the ones who stayed watched the city empty around them in slow motion. The elderly are overrepresented here, in the way the elderly are overrepresented in any place that has lost its young. They stayed because the house was paid off. They stayed because moving was expensive. They stayed because their doctor was here, and their church was here, and their husband was buried here. And the idea of starting over at 76 in a city where nobody knew them was more frightening than staying in a city that was disappearing. Youngstown has one of the 5 highest violent crime rates in the United States. For an elderly person living alone in a neighborhood where half the houses are boarded, the crime is not an abstraction. It is the sound of a window breaking 3 doors down at 2 a.m. It is the decision, made once and then quietly enforced for years, to stop answering the door after dark. It is the iron bars installed on the porch in 1997, which now frame the rocking chair that nobody sits in anymore because the porch is no longer safe to sit on. On a kitchen corkboard in a house on the north side, there is a delivery log from the Meals on Wheels program, dated 2019. The log has 14 names on it, the clients of a single volunteer driver on a single route. The driver was a retired schoolteacher who took the route twice a week for 8 years. She pinned each week's log to her board as a record. 6 of the 14 names have a penciled line through them. Beside 3 of those names is a small date in her handwriting. One says April 20, COVID. Another says July 21. A third says simply gone. She does not know where. The family did not tell her. One day the house was empty, and then there was a for sale sign, and then the sign was taken down, and the house sat empty. And then one winter the pipes froze and burst, and now the house is one of the several thousand vacant properties the city of Youngstown is slowly, tract by tract, trying to demolish. The schoolteacher stopped driving the route in 2022. Her own vision had begun to fail. The program could not find a replacement driver for her route. It was quietly consolidated with another, and half of the clients on her original log were informed, by form letter, that their delivery day was being changed, and their new driver would not have time to come inside, only to leave the tray on the porch. Measurable deprivation here has a specific name: deaths of despair. The phrase was coined by economists at Princeton in the mid-2000s to describe the rising mortality among white working-class Americans from drug overdose, alcohol-related liver disease, and suicide. The data is stark. In post-industrial cities like Youngstown, Dayton, Flint, and Scranton, deaths of despair among Americans over 65 have risen by double digits every year since 2015. The image of opioid deaths as a young person's crisis is a media artifact. The oldest opioid-dependent population in America is concentrated in precisely these towns. Pain medication prescribed for decades of industrial injury, long since outstripped by tolerance, now chased in back rooms by men and women in their late 70s. If you were to stand on the front porch of a house on Midlothian Boulevard in late autumn, you would see the sycamores shedding their leaves over empty lots. You would see 3 houses down, a porch light that has been left on by mistake. The occupant died last week, and nobody has been back to the house yet. You would see, at the end of the street, the old Wick Avenue Community Center, boarded and plywood-clad, a hand-painted sign announcing a bingo night that took place in 2019. You would hear, somewhere in the distance, a train going through, one of the few remaining freight trains on what used to be a dozen active lines. And you would recognize, perhaps for the first time, that the silence underneath the train whistle is the real sound of Youngstown. Not decay, stillness, the stillness of a city that has stopped. We have 2 places left, the 2 darkest, the 2 most systematically abandoned corners of the entire country. Number 2 is a region of the American South where the life expectancy is the lowest in the continental United States, and where the nursing homes have the worst federal inspection ratings in the nation. And number 1 is not a place at all. Number 1 is a system, an industry, one that most of you watching tonight have already, at some point in your life, stepped inside. Or one that you will. We have reached the end of the countdown. The 2 places we are about to enter are the darkest on the list, and they are dark in different ways. The first is a geography, a specific stretch of American land where the numbers are so grim that researchers from foreign universities fly in to study them, the way they would study a developing country. The second is not geography at all. It is a system, a machine, an industry, and it does not care where you live. It will find you wherever you are, if you are old enough, and poor enough, and alone enough to end up inside it. Number 2 The Mississippi Delta, Bolivar and Sunflower counties, drive north from Jackson, Mississippi, through flat cotton country, where the horizon is interrupted only by grain elevators and the occasional steeple of a church whose congregation is dwindling, and you enter the Mississippi Delta. Bolivar County, Sunflower County, the counties that together form the heart of a region where the life expectancy for Black Americans in 2026 is 69 years, the lowest documented life expectancy of any contiguous region in the continental United States of America. Lower than Bangladesh, lower than Nepal, lower than several nations the State Department lists as places Americans should not travel to without caution. The ratio of physicians to residents in Sunflower County is approximately 1 doctor per 4,000 people. Parts of Bolivar County are worse. The federal government classifies the entire region as a medically underserved area, a designation so routine here that it has lost its meaning. Everywhere is underserved. The hospital in Greenwood cut its inpatient cardiac services in 2021. The hospital in Clarksdale runs perpetually below the staffing levels the state nominally requires. The nursing home inspection data from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services tells a specific and terrible story. Nursing homes in Mississippi have, for the last 5 consecutive years, had the worst average federal inspection ratings in the nation. Not among the worst. The worst. Step inside one of the oldest churches in Cleveland, Mississippi, on a Sunday morning in March. The building is a small wood frame structure, built in 1923, painted white and repainted white so many times that the paint is thicker than the wood in places. The pews are oak. The hymnals are from 1987. The congregation, which once filled the building, now numbers 11 people on a good Sunday. 8 of them are over 70. In the back of one of the pews, tucked into the slot where a hymnal used to sit, is a church fan. The kind you used to find in every black church across the South. A stiff cardboard paddle stapled to a flat wooden stick, printed on one side with an image of the Good Shepherd or a biblical verse, and on the other side with the name of the local funeral home that paid for the printing. This particular fan advertises a funeral home in Indianola, whose owner died in 2004. The business closed the following year. The fan is dated, in small print at the bottom, 1987. The woman who has used this fan for nearly 40 years is 84 years old now. She has buried her husband, her brother, 2 of her children, and most of her friends out of this church. She uses the fan every Sunday. It still works. Nothing about the heat in the Mississippi Delta has changed in the last 40 years, and nothing about the rhythm of her Sunday morning has changed either. The same pew, the same fan, fewer faces. Measurable deprivation in the Delta is not a story of decline. It is a story of a place that never received the investment the rest of the country took for granted, and then was quietly left to continue not receiving it. The federal dollars that rebuilt post-industrial cities in the 1980s, the nursing home regulations that were strengthened in the Northeast in the 2000s, the expansions of Medicaid that covered home-based care in 38 other states. Mississippi did not expand Medicaid. Hundreds of thousands of Mississippi residents, including approximately 100,000 elderly, fall into the coverage gap between what Medicaid covers in their state and what the Affordable Care Act was designed to cover. They are too poor for subsidized insurance, and too well off, on paper, for the state's stripped-down Medicaid. They have nothing. Imagine the sound of a single voice leading a hymn in that small white church on a March morning. The voice is thin now. She is 84, and her breath is not what it was. The other 10 voices come in on the second verse. The cardboard fan moves in the still air. Outside, the cotton fields stretch for miles, and the highway is empty, and the church has no pastor this week, because the pastor is now the pastor of 4 other dying churches in 3 different counties, and he can only make it here once a month. Where will they be, the woman with the 1987 fan and the 10 voices around her, in 5 years? Does anyone, in the offices where the federal Medicaid policies are written, know her name? Has anyone ever asked? Number 1, the American Nursing Home Industrial Complex. This is the one I told you about at the very beginning. This is not a town. This is not a county. This is not a state. This is the room with the unanswered call button, the hallway with the dinner tray from Tuesday, the name card on the door. And it exists, in some version, in every single one of the 50 states of this country. Number 1 is not a place you might accidentally find yourself in. It is a place that 1 in 4 American seniors will, at some point, be placed inside, often against their will, sometimes with no warning. And once you are inside, the data shows, it is extraordinarily difficult to get out. There are approximately 15,300 nursing homes in the United States of America, housing approximately 1.2 million residents. Roughly 70% of these facilities are for-profit. Of the for-profit facilities, an increasing share, now estimated above 11%, are owned by private equity firms, many of which took ownership in the last 15 years through leveraged buyouts. The economic model that has replaced the old non-profit, community-owned, religiously affiliated nursing home is not a caregiving model. It is an extraction model. It extracts Medicare and Medicaid dollars from the federal government, and it extracts savings and home equity from the residents and their families, and it minimizes the single largest variable cost in the business, which is staff. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the federal agency that inspects and rates nursing homes, has documented year after year that approximately 75% of U.S. nursing homes do not meet the federal minimum staffing standards that the agency itself has proposed. The average annual staff turnover rate in American nursing homes is approximately 94%. Let that number rest for a moment. 94%. In a given year, a resident of an average American nursing home will see almost the entire staff that cared for them replaced by strangers. The aide who learned how they took their tea, who knew which side they preferred to sleep on, who recognized the small changes in mood that preceded a fall. That aide is, statistically, not there 12 months later. 1 in 3 nursing home residents in America reports having experienced some form of abuse, physical, emotional, financial, or neglectful, during their stay. This is not from an advocacy group. This is from federal inspection data and peer-reviewed academic studies. 1 in 3. Picture the specific room. It does not matter which state. Texas, Florida, Illinois, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Pick one. The room measures approximately 12 feet by 15 feet. There is a bed. There is a small wardrobe. There is a window that looks out often on a parking lot. Above the bed, taped to the wall at a height that can be seen from the pillow, is a photograph. A grandchild. A son. A wedding day from 1962. The photograph is the only object in the room that was chosen by the person who lives there. Everything else, the bed, the sheets, the wardrobe, the chair, the tray table, the call button, was already there when they arrived, and will still be there when they leave. On the door of that room is a name card. First initial, last name. A small laminated sign, identical to every other laminated sign on every other door in the hallway, in every other facility in every other state. The call button, clipped to the bedsheet, lights up a small red indicator above the door when it is pressed. In a fully staffed facility, that light is responded to within a few minutes. In the 75% of facilities that are understaffed, which is to say in most of them, the average response time can stretch on the overnight shift to nearly an hour. An hour for an 88-year-old woman who needs help getting to the bathroom. An hour for a man having a cardiac event and no longer able to call out. And here is the statistic that the country has not entirely reckoned with and may never fully reckon with. During the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, approximately 200,000 nursing home residents and staff died. Nursing home residents represent less than 0.5% of the American population. They accounted for approximately 1/3 of all American COVID deaths. The disease did not do this alone. The understaffing did it. The low wages that forced aides to work at multiple facilities to make rent did it. The infection control protocols that existed on paper and not in practice did it. The for-profit model, which had spent 2 decades optimizing away every margin of safety, did it. 200,000 people. Most of them died in rooms that looked like the one described above. Many of them died alone because visitor restrictions kept their families out. Many of them died having not been touched by anyone who knew their name in weeks. If you were to walk through the corridor of an average American nursing home tonight on the overnight shift, you would pass rooms where call buttons have been pressed and lights have been blinking for 47 minutes, an hour and a half. You would pass the nurses' station, where one licensed nurse is responsible for 42 residents because her colleague called in sick, and the agency could not find a replacement. You would pass a supply closet whose door has been left open, because it is faster to leave it open than to find the right key every time. You would pass the shared bathroom. You would pass the small common room, where a television is playing to no audience because the residents who used to sit there have stopped coming out of their rooms. And you would pass door after door after door, each with its small laminated name card. First initial, last name, room number. The name cards of Americans whose working lives built the wealth that now pays for the facilities they are quietly dying inside. The American nursing home industrial complex is the single worst place to grow old in the United States of America. Not because it is hidden, not because it is rural, not because it is poor. It is the worst because it is visible, documented, regulated, and franchised. And none of that has been enough to make it safe. It is a $175 billion industry that knows in remarkable detail what it is doing. and it continues to do it. Number 1 on this list is the place where the American bargain we described in Chapter 1 ends. It is the final room. It is the last address on the driver's license. It is the return address on the letter informing the family of the death. It is for approximately 1 in 4 older Americans where the last chapter is actually written. And if you are watching this tonight, and you have a mother, a father, an aunt, a grandparent, anyone old, anywhere, take a moment. Think about where they are. Think about whether they have visitors. Think about whether anyone, including you, would know if the call button in their room had been blinking unanswered for 47 minutes tonight.